Now to read what is on this chart called Universal Mathematics. The 7 tones of the universal constant are each removed one from the other, the square of the distance to the next highest potential. The energy of each of the 4 units is exactly equal. And it says toward the bottom, the universe of dimensions is divided into plus and minus equilibrium. The universal seesaw is ever tilting above and below its balancing point in inertia. Both movements are simultaneous and exactly balanced. The wave is the universal seesaw within which all dimensions are measured. This is dimension chart number 5, distance dimension of tonal relations. All mass has a measurable tonal relation to all other mass. All potential of energy is active, orderly displacement of inactive inertia, the ratios of which are measurable in all dimensions. Okay, now this chart is the Universal Mathematics, dimension chart number 6, distance dimensions of energy of tones within a wave. The 4 universal reproductive constants are placed in their true relative positions. And there's quite a few words on this page. I hope you can see it if you get this page and make it bigger. Now, to continue reading. The equator of all mass is, therefore, the dividing plane between the opposing plus and minus pressures of the electromagnetic forces. It is the plane where expansion pressure is preponderant in the maximum expansion of the mass. It is the plane of least density. The pole of rotation of all mass is the line where contraction pressure is preponderant and culminates at the point of north, the point of maximum density and rigidity. All electropositive actions are produced in all mass by contraction of the generative cones of energy toward the high contraction pressures of their poles of rotation. All electronegative reactions are produced in all mass by expansion of the radiative cones of energy toward the high expansion pressures of their equators. This action and reaction of contraction and expansion supplies the electromagnetic motor force for the construction of the little corpuscular pumps of which all mass is composed, and by which its mechanics are coordinated. In the process of accumulation of little mass into big mass, the little pumps meld into one big pump, each working as a unit, but all working for the whole. This is as true in the accumulation of mass into the form of man as into a planet. Big mass is but a multiplication of the power of little mass. The desire of electricity is to accumulate mass toward the north. The desire of magnetism is to dissipate mass toward the south. Electricity attempts the expression of its desire for action by opposing inertia and ends in non-motion of its speed-time dimension at the ultimate gravitative centers of all masses and systems. This effect is counterbalanced, however, by its opposite effect of increased speed of revolution in power-time dimension. Magnetism attempts the expression of its desire to suppress motion through opposing it, and ends in expressing great motion at the equators and ecliptic areas of all masses and systems. This effect is, in its turn, also counterbalanced by its opposite effect of increased speed of revolution in power-time dimension. Electricity strives to simulate inertia by gyroscopic perfection of motion. The farther north the position of any mass or system in any wave, the more stable is the gyroscopic perfection of its revolution, and the more elusively unstable its precessional progressions. Magnetism, in seeking to suppress motion, actually assists it by drawing the harmonic circles of its area dimension gradually into the plane of the electric north, thus creating a new south plane of 0 latitude around the point of north at the overtone position of each wave. This plane is reflected at the equator of each mass of each wave. This new reflected image of the south inertial plane in mass R system will be called the ecliptic plane of mass R system. The ecliptic plane of mass R system revolves with revolving mass R system. The ecliptics of all elements between the inertial harmonic circles and the overtones vary in their expansion and contraction according to their position and the relative expansion and contraction of the opposing cones of energy. At the overtone, the ecliptic is a plane born of the melding of both contours and bases in the plane of the melded apices of the opposing cones. From the overtones toward inertia, the ecliptics of all waves, systems, and masses expand as the bases of the generative cones expand. The apparent relative ability of mass to attract and to repel is governed by the contraction of its polar magnetic bases and the expansion of its ecliptic. The greater the expansion of the ecliptic and the greater the diameters of precessional orbits, the less the ability of a mass to attract and to repel. The less the expansion of the ecliptic and the less the diameters of the precessional orbits, the greater the ability of a mass to attract and to repel. In any mass, the diameters of its polar magnetic bases and of its axial precessional orbits increase as the mass recedes from and decreases as it approaches its nuclear sun's equatorial plane. In any mass, the expansion of its ecliptic, the diameters of its equatorial precessional orbits, and of its polar magnetic bases increase as the mass recedes from and decrease as it approaches its nuclear sun's equatorial plane. If these laws are well founded, the expansion of the ecliptic, the diameters of polar magnetic bases, and the dimensions of precessional orbits must be related to the attraction of gravitation and the repulsion of radiation. Let us consider some familiar effects of the above principles in relation to this planet and the solar system. Consider the great expansion of the ecliptic plane areas of the outer planets of low potential as compared to those of the inner ones of high potential. Consider the tenuity of the outer planets where the precessional orbits are extended as compared to the density of the inner ones where the precessional orbits are restricted. Consider the preponderance of centrifugal force, which counteracts the gravitative power of the very much decomposed outer planets as compared to the preponderance of centripetal force, which assists the inner planets in holding themselves together. Consider the outer planets' charging poles, which are far removed from their poles of rotation, as compared to the inner planets' charging poles, which are closer to their axial poles, the nearer the planet is to the sun. The charging poles are wrongly termed magnetic poles. Consider the slight attraction and repulsion power of the outer planets which float in extremely low pressure zones, as compared to the great attraction and repulsion power of the inner ones which float in high pressure zones. To remain as close to the sun as Mercury requires a potential approaching that of the sun itself. Consider the low melting and freezing points of the outer planets where our gases are their solids, as compared to the high melting points of the inner planets. To remain frozen as close to the sun as Mercury requires a pressure equilibrium approaching that of the sun itself. Let us now consider the charging poles in respect to their apparent relative ability to attract. It is commonly supposed that the north pole of a magnet is the positive pole which attracts, and the south pole of a magnet is its negative pole which repels.